Imagine standing before the most powerful religious figure in medieval Europe. He demands your submission. He claims divine authority over your church, your kingdom, your soul. And you, representing a small island nation on the edge of the known world, look him straight in the eye and say, "We have nothing to do with Rome." This isn't fiction. This happened. And the story behind it reveals one of history's greatest cover-ups, a deliberate falsification of the historical record that has shaped how we understand the spread of Christianity for over 1,000 years. Here's the question that will drive everything we explore today. What if Britain didn't need Rome to bring Christianity to its shores? What if, in fact, Britain was already a thriving Christian nation, sending out its own missionaries, building grand cathedrals, and establishing theological schools, more than 4 centuries before the Roman Catholic Church even existed? The evidence suggests exactly that. And the proof comes not from British propaganda, but from Rome's own archives, from the pens of Roman Catholic scholars, and from a single letter written in the year 183 AD that the Vatican couldn't quite erase from history. Welcome to a story of ancient faith, political manipulation, and the British bishops who refused to bow. Welcome to Uncovered Biblical History and Traditions, the channel dedicated to lost stories of the biblical past. Discover stories of pre-Christian historical roots, biblical legends, lost church history, and forgotten historical characters of faith. It is very helpful if you hit the like, subscribe, and share. Help build my channel, and let's take a look together into these uncovered forgotten tales. The year is approximately 603 AD. Saint Augustine, not the famous African theologian, but Augustine of Canterbury, has arrived in Britain on a mission from Rome. His task is clear: bring the British Church under papal control. The Pope wants submission. Augustine expects compliance. But when Augustine meets with the British bishops for the first time, something extraordinary happens. These aren't primitive pagans grateful for enlightenment. These are educated, confident church leaders who've been governing their own Christian communities for centuries. And they're insulted by Augustine's presumption. The British bishops deliver a statement that echoes through history: "We have nothing to do with Rome. We know nothing of the Bishop of Rome in his new character of the Pope. We are the British Church, the Archbishop of which is accountable to God alone, having no superior on earth." Augustine is stunned. His Roman entourage is furious. How dare these backwater Britons reject the authority of Rome? But here's what makes this moment so significant: the British bishops weren't rebels rejecting legitimate authority. They were defending something far older than papal claims, a Christian tradition that had existed in Britain since the 1st century, established by direct disciples of Christ himself. Sir William Blackstone, the legendary English legal scholar, would later write that the ancient British Church was a stranger to the Bishop of Rome and all his pretended authorities. Sir Francis Bacon, the philosopher and historian, documented how the Britons told Augustine they would not be subject to him, nor let him pervert the ancient laws of their church. Bacon noted that they maintained their church's liberty for 500 years after Augustine's arrival, making Britain the last of all the churches of Europe that gave up the power to the Roman beast. But why were the British so confident? What gave them the audacity to reject Rome? The answer lies buried in the historical record, a record that Augustine and his successors worked desperately to obscure. Let's travel back to May 28, in the year 137 AD. On this spring day, a young British prince named Lucius kneels in the sacred waters of Chalice Well, at the foot of Glastonbury Tor. His uncle, Saint Timotheus, baptizes him into the Christian faith. This isn't a conversion by Roman missionaries. This is a family affair. Christianity has already been established in Britain for a full century, brought by Joseph of Arimathea, the wealthy disciple who provided the tomb for Jesus' burial, and possibly by the Apostle Paul himself during his missionary journeys. By the time Lucius becomes king, he doesn't need Rome to tell him about Jesus. He's been raised in the faith. And in 156 AD, he does something remarkable: he officially declares Britain a Christian nation. The entire kingdom, 27 years before he ever contacts Rome. To commemorate his baptism, Lucius builds a magnificent church in 167 AD, St. Michael's, constructed on the summit of Glastonbury Tor, the most sacred Druidic site in all of Britain. The symbolism is powerful. Christianity has not just arrived, it has taken root and displaced the old religion at its very heart. 3 years later, in 170 AD, Lucius founds what will become Winchester Cathedral, one of the most majestic churches in Christian history. This building still stands today, housing the tombs of England's greatest warriors and treasures like the casket of Alfred the Great's grandfather. Here's what's crucial: all of this, the baptism, the nationalization, the grand cathedrals, happens decades before meaningful contact with Rome. Britain is already thoroughly, officially, magnificently Christian. So when does Rome enter the picture? In 183 AD, 27 years after Britain became a Christian nation, King Lucius sends 2 emissaries, Medway and Elvan, on a diplomatic mission to Rome. And here's where the historical falsification begins. Roman Catholic writers would later claim that Lucius was pleading with Rome to send missionaries to convert him and his pagan kingdom. They portrayed this as Britain begging for the light of Christianity from the superior Roman Church. But the actual correspondence between Lucius and Eleutherius, the Bishop of Rome, tells a completely different story. And it's this letter, preserved despite centuries of attempts to rewrite its meaning, that destroys the Roman narrative. Lucius isn't asking to be converted. Britain doesn't need missionaries. Instead, Lucius is asking for something much more mundane. He wants some of his British missionaries back. You see, British Christians had been sent to Rome to help Bishop Eleutherius evangelize within the Roman Empire. Britain was exporting Christian teachers, not importing them. But now Lucius needs them home to expand his already thriving Christian programs in Britain. 6 major historians confirm this account and the 183 AD date: Gildas, Geoffrey of Monmouth, the Venerable Bede, Urban, John of Teignmouth, and remarkably, Capgrave, described as the most learned of English Augustinians. Even members of Roman Catholic orders acknowledged that Britain's version of events was true. But the most damning evidence comes from Eleutherius himself. The Bishop of Rome's letter to King Lucius, preserved by John Fox in his famous Acts and Monuments, reveals everything Rome tried to hide. Eleutherius writes, "Ye have received of late through God's mercy in the realm of Britain the law and faith of Christ. Ye have within you within the realm both the parties of the Scriptures." Read that carefully. Eleutherius acknowledges that Britain already has the Christian faith. He confirms that Britain possesses the complete Scriptures, both Old and New Testaments. He's not writing to a pagan king he's converting. He's corresponding with an established Christian monarch. Then Eleutherius says something even more remarkable: "Ye be God's vicar in your kingdom." He's calling Lucius God's representative in Britain. No mention of papal authority. No claim that Lucius must submit to Rome. Instead, a Roman bishop acknowledging a British king's spiritual authority in his own realm. This is a primary source, a contemporary document written at the time of the events it describes. It's infinitely more reliable than histories written centuries later, and it completely contradicts the Roman Catholic narrative that Rome brought Christianity to Britain. If you would like further context and the rest of the story, check out previous videos and future videos. If you would like more information where to research this subject, pause this image and look into these resources or find resources in description. If you have book sources or links of your own on this subject, please share in comments or email me. Thank you. So why don't more people know this story? Because Augustine and his successors embarked on a systematic campaign of historical revisionism. They deliberately confused dates, attributed false meanings to correspondence, and created an entirely fictional narrative about British Christianity's origins. Even the term Pope itself is part of the deception. Roman Catholic writers developed the habit of calling all early bishops of Rome Pope, even though this title didn't exist until the year 610 AD, when the Emperor Phocas created the office as political revenge against a rival bishop. Gregory I, who sent Augustine to Britain, was never actually Pope. He was simply Bishop of Rome, and he specifically refused the title when it was offered to him. But by retroactively calling early Roman bishops Pope, Catholic writers created the illusion of an ancient, continuous papal authority that never actually existed during the time of the Apostles or the early Church. The British bishops understood this deception. That's why they told Augustine they know nothing of the Bishop of Rome in his new character of the Pope. They recognized papal claims as the innovation they were. Cardinal Baronius, a high-ranking Roman Catholic scholar with access to the Vatican archives, examined the records and concluded that the Augustinian claims were false. He provided a detailed chronological account from 36 AD onward that confirmed British priority in Christianity. Even from within the Roman Catholic Church, honest scholars acknowledged the truth: Britain didn't receive Christianity from Rome. Britain had Christianity first. Consider the evidence that even Rome couldn't suppress. When Lucius's emissaries returned from Rome in 183 AD, they brought back 2 British missionaries, Duvan and Fagin. Both had been educated at Avalon, the ancient Christian school founded by Joseph of Arimathea at Glastonbury. These weren't Romans teaching Britons, these were Britons who had been teaching Romans, now returning home. Elvan, one of the emissaries, was himself a product of this ancient British Christian tradition. Pitseus, a Roman Catholic canon, documented that Elvan was brought up at Glastonbury and was educated in the school of St. Joseph of Arimathea. This isn't British mythology, this is Roman Catholic scholarship confirming apostolic age Christianity in Britain. Elvan would go on to become the second Bishop of London and the first prelate of St. Peter's of Cornhill, a church that King Lucius built and that remains famous in London to this day, physical proof of 2nd century British Christianity. The story of British Christianity matters because it reveals how easily history can be rewritten by those with power and institutional interests. For centuries, the official narrative claimed that civilization and faith flowed from Rome to the barbarian periphery. Britain was cast as a backward island rescued from darkness by Roman enlightenment. But the documentary evidence, preserved in letters, confirmed by multiple historians, corroborated by physical structures still standing today, tells a different story. Christianity didn't flow from Rome to Britain. It arrived in Britain directly from the Holy Land in the 1st century, carried by disciples who knew Jesus personally. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.